Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with Grant Turner, Mark Ostrander. We are weighing in, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. I am fresh back from junior duels. And since I'm one of the three people on here and get to talk the most, that's what we're going to talk about first. Although with today's panel, they're probably more than happy to talk about it. Go on, boys. Crow about Iowa. Let's go. Let's get it out of the way.
Did they win? Grant, did they win again?
Again. Okay. All right, let's go. No, they look good. They're very good. They're very good.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, this group has been really good for a long time. So they put it together in the duels. So, I mean, all those like Oklahoma, Minnesota, Illinois, like perennial powerhouses all look really good too. Just Iowa just kind of put a better tournament together. So really happy for, all the boys up there, Seabolt, Morningstar, Brett Robbins, Dylan Carew. They put together a good team, man.
Yeah, they wrestle well. Mark, did you get to watch any of it?
I did not, but I was kind of working most of the weekend, but I was kind of updating my phone and getting results throughout. So it was fun to see.
Yeah. So let me start out by giving full love and dap to Iowa. They looked really good. They're well coached. We made a couple jokes on the commentary in the finals about putting seatbelts on the chairs for Morningstar and Seabolt. Bobby Cook and those guys were strapped in. Those other guys popped up a lot. But they do a great job. The kids listen to them. To me, what was interesting was Illinois and California did not look like their usual selves. And I think that had a lot to do with them not having a normal season. In Illinois' case, they're having, like the Officials Association are putting on the equivalent of their district sectional state tournament. So like Dean Hamady, Vanderveer, Vinny Zerbin, 3 or 4 of those guys that are really top guys were not able to make it. But at the end of the day, it's who you bring and it's who wrestles and who shows up. Rockfin just did a really good article about all the stars, like who really wrestled well and all that sort of stuff. So I encourage people to check that out. I'm sure other people will have it as well. And I also tell people, junior duels, man, it's so fun. Grant, you're normally there. I sent you a text. You sent the B team this year. But it's a really fun event to watch. Oklahoma usually is a good team because it's so easy for them to get those kids there and because they're good. But those kids really support each other. Like Christian Forbes and Sam Smith wrestled in the state finals. And 3 months later, they're giving each other high fives as one of them's walking off the mat. And you see it, that's just a microcosm of what's going on there. But, GT, especially you probably know a lot of these kids. I did the play-by-play for the finals. It was a one-man booth. And I was very fortunate. There was 4 of us up there, though, whichever referee was sitting in that chair, there was the scoreboard computer operator, and then there was the camera guy. Those 2 guys, both of their sons were wrestling for Iowa, for the A team from Iowa. So first of all, I want to shout those guys out. They were awesome. And the guy sitting next to me every time would give me the background, like, hey, Mark Ostrander's from Fort Dodge, Iowa, and was a 3-time state champ or whatever the case may be. So,
I didn't win any, but tell the guy thank you.
Yeah. So, but he would give me the data on these guys, if they'd wrestled anybody, just a lot of stuff to help you. And, normally like Andy Hamilton had done that for us in the past when I was working for track wrestling. So it made it easier. I know a lot of the Oklahoma kids, and also shout out to all the guys that texted in that were sending us stuff like, hey, this is who this guy is and all that stuff. But if you watch the duel, it started out fire. Like the first 2 matches were barn burners for Carter Young, won a close one. And then J-Dub wrestled Ratchie. Is that how you pronounce his name? Ratchie?
Yeah, Caleb Rathjen.
Yeah. So, those were the first 2 matches. You had 4 guys who were all ranked in like the top 10 in the country. And Oklahoma won those, and then Iowa reeled off 6 straight wins. The final score was like 40-23, and it was 10-5 in terms of matches. Also, shout out, I mean, there was 2 girls tournaments and a boys Greco tournament. So people don't understand there's 4 tournaments going on in 4 days, 2 the first 2 days, 2 the second 2 days. It's not that expensive to stay in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's not that expensive to get a ticket. And literally you can walk up and sit next to whatever mat you want. You can just bring your lawn chair and sit there. So if you, again, I know we work for USA Wrestling on this podcast, but I cannot encourage people strongly enough to really consider going to these events because they're awesome. So, and these are the superstars of tomorrow. These are also the superstars of next month. A bunch of these guys are going to be at Fargo. The Drake Ayalas, the Jordan Williams, the Carter Youngs, you know, the Christian Forbes, Joey Cruzes, you know, all, I mean, I don't, 25 other guys I didn't mention, so please don't be offended, but you know, those are the guys. I mean, Carter Young just came off winning a Pan Am, you know, so, you know, Drake Ayala is one who's number 1. I mean, there's superstars there. And, you know, GT, you mentioned Mark refuses to get social media, but, you know, you mentioned that the Twitter stuff is pretty interesting on what's going on with Iowa people and the rest of the country right now. So,
as one of my friends would say, the tea, the social tea of like everybody, like, yeah.
You know what's really interesting is I don't think the kids care that much. I think it's like adults that got like nothing better to do but to argue about it. Like the kids shake hands, they scrap, you know, like Drake Ayala, they come to the head table, right? And the kid from Oklahoma wrestled before. When the next guy came up that had wrestled Ayala, he gives him a high five. He goes, "Go make a name for yourself, shock the world." And Ayala's kind of laughing about it, you know, which is what he should. And Drake's beating him like 8-0. The kid gets in a quad pod. Drake goes like for a 4-point gut wrench, and the guy grabs his leg, pulls him under, and gets 2. And Oklahoma goes crazy, which you should when you score on the number 1 guy in the country. But when it was over, you know, Drake just did the thing, the Iowa on his chest, but that's no disrespect to Oklahoma. They're just saying we're Iowa, we're back. Iowa's used to winning. The state of Iowa is used to winning a lot of things in wrestling, and wrestling's important in Iowa. Wrestling's important in Oklahoma. I mean, I'm from Missouri, but I'm from St. Louis, and in these big, big cities, wrestling is not as important. Wrestling's really important in college towns. And so it was one of the things I love the most about watching junior duels is all the kids going crazy for each other, you know, and like a lot of these kids grew up together. Like GT, you were kind enough to introduce me to the guys at Pinnacle Wrestling as an example. And a lot of these kids, like you might go to XYZ high school, Mark goes to ABC, I go to LMO, but we all wrestle together at, say, Pinnacle in the off season. So we're boys, we're buddies, we train. Even if we're not in the same weight classes, well, we know each other, we're rooting for each other. And even if it's, well, you beat me in the state finals, well, we're still going to go at it. We're still trying to help Minnesota be the best. And I think junior duels is kind of pure that way. It's super cool. And there's way more team camaraderie than Fargo, because Fargo, your job is to go win your bracket, and they add up the team score later. You know, you can't even tell what's going on. So I have a great time going every year. I want to thank Joel Kester from the Sports Commission. He's awesome. I got to visit the Cox Convention Center and set up the the Oklahoma Border Brawl, for 2023 when the Nationals are in Tulsa. It's going to be awesome. The ballroom where we're going to have it in is going to be sick. We met with the lighting and everybody else. We're super excited about that. Okay.
I got one thing I want to say, David. And you're right. Iowa fans they go crazy about wrestling, and they have for a long time. Iowa wrestling in college has always been it's kind of like our Olympic sport because we don't have, not Olympic, but professional sports. We don't have professional sports in Iowa. So when you get into a system like when Iowa State was really, really good back when Gable wrestled, you know, the whole state got behind Iowa State. Then Gable went to Iowa and built that dynasty there, and the whole state got behind them. UNI, they bring in new coaches, state gets behind them. You got Grandview that ran off 10 straight national championships in a row. You had Iowa Central with 5 or 6 in a row. The state loves that. Our high school program, and I'm not being disrespectful whatsoever, has never been the top high school program in the country.
When you say high school, timeout, high school program, you mean one individual school?
No, I'm talking about the high school compared to other states. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm talking, we're not a Pennsylvania. We're not in Illinois. We're not in Ohio. We're not a California. Because we break into so many different classes. We have good kids, but we don't have the elite, the 5-star blue chippers that often. We just don't have it. So to see Iowa go into an environment like this and win gets the state really excited. So,
well, it's also a function of population, right? Like Iowa, just from a population standpoint, is going to have a hard time with a California or a Pennsylvania. The number of classes is a whole podcast probably in and of itself, where Iowa has 3 classes, Missouri has 4 classes, and California with 800 schools has 1. But again, as the clubs get better, the high school wrestling is going to get better overall. So listen, Iowa wrestled great. It's how much I got love for you guys, but I intentionally put 2 guys on the podcast that I think are awesome, but I'm outnumbered whenever we have an Iowa conversation. But you got to send, but it's awesome. Those guys were going crazy. TJ Seabolt, Morningstar, like you said, Robbins, I think Adam Fellers, like all those guys are going nuts. And it's important. It's important. Oklahoma, when they won 2 years ago, when Serber won on the last match, it's important. And honestly, for some of these kids that don't end up being the elite of the elite, this will be one of the coolest things they were ever a part of. And like, Grant, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, you were at a wedding and there were guys there that maybe were All-Americans. Maybe they took 8th, but they were part of a national championship team. They have a ring and they're going to carry that with them for the rest of their life. And that's going to give them confidence. That's something they can put on their resume. It helps them when they get in dark days, down times. Like I was part of a national championship team where I was a national champion. And I think I'm guilty of this because I'm just like looking at the best guys ranked in the world or women in the world or Division I. There's so many other parts of wrestling that are amazing. And junior duels is kind of a microcosm of that. So, but for sure, your point is well taken about Iowa. And I got love for you guys, but I just got to play the other side of the fence just to keep it balanced. So, portal news: Matt Ramos from Illinois, that's at Minnesota, is in the portal. Formerly a world champion, age group world champion. Evan Wick made his announcement. Went to Cal Poly. It was down to Cal Poly in Penn State. I think a lot of us thought he would end up there because of his brother. I'm going to have Chris Chianuma, the assistant coach, on this week on Matt Chat. Big team race implications there. Gage Garcia goes from Michigan to Lehigh. Shane Griffith stays at Stanford. I don't think that's a surprise to us. I think we all figured Rob Cole probably did some due diligence and figured if everybody was leaving, he probably wouldn't have taken the job. GT, I'll let you go first. All those 4 guys, Ramos, Wick, Garcia, Griffith, what sticks out to you about those decisions?
Well, I think, Evan going to wrestle with his brother at Cal Poly is really cool. And I think it's really cool for the school. I think it's really cool for their family, being able to, one, compete, on the same team, train with each other. It'd be great for their parents to be close to them. So I think that's really, really cool. I think as we discussed before, with Shane staying at Stanford, like he gets to retell that story next year as the defending champ, really cool. Like we should get some major media coverage with him staying at the university, helping them correct that ship a little bit. So, I mean, my thought process is like, I kind of want to get Shane to like get some major interviews to like help propel that program back to, regular season competition. So out of those things, that's what I mostly take away from the 4 things we just discussed is, man, that's going to be cool to watch. I'm really looking forward to seeing maybe if that gets all the way to like, a Good Morning America type interview.
You know what? That's That's a very, very good point. The way to grow wrestling is to get it in the mainstream media, right? Like the Olympics are coming up here. I was watching the Olympic trials for track and field last night. And I don't watch track and field, but every 4 years I watch track and field, or in this case, every 5 years, you know. But so Marco, Griffith, Garcia, Wick, Ramos, thoughts?
Kind of like Grant, you know, I'm kind of Evan and Shane Griffith. Those are the two that I really focus on because the other two have not been Division I All-Americans as of yet. Not that they're not going to be. So you kind of look at those two. I think Shane going back there is going to help the program get and keep kids from leaving, which is huge. I would not be surprised if 2 or 3 more of the guys that were on the team that were returning All-Americans or will be All-Americans don't end up being back there too. And then Evan Wick, obviously. I guess my big question with Evan is what weight is he going? He made a reference when he made his announcement that he might go 74 and they might move their All-American at 74 up to 84 because they have talked. So, I mean, that just makes the picture 74 turn it into one of the most outstanding weights that I've ever. This is going to compare to the 149 bracket that when
Burroughs and all those guys.
Yeah, when they had that documentary on Flow Wrestling.
Yeah.
It's going to be very similar to that because you're going to have, it's going to be a great tournament. The D1 Nationals this year is going to be like nothing we've ever seen. Guarantee it.
Yeah. So you're a good segue. We're going to talk about returning All-Americans, but just to give shouts to the other two guys, I watched Matt Ramos wrestle in Coralville and I actually said to Agam and Becker, I'm like, is he going to be happy not wrestling for a couple of years behind McKee? And they're like, oh, he's fine. And, you know, I think those guys do a great job. But when you're that good, when you're medaling at these age group, you know, All-Americans, top 4, top 5, you know, you're one of the 70 best guys in the country, you know, which is what to be a starter. And he's probably a lot better than 70th. You know, he's probably in 33, like he's good enough to be in the bracket at nationals at the very least. Very interesting on where he's going to end up when you kind of start doing research on where he might go. I mean, I think we could talk about that at a later date. I don't know who Illinois has at 125 right now, but, you know, he's from Illinois. Iowa State, you know, they got Turkina there. But you look at some of the other schools, like Prada just went to OU. Ohio State's got Master Giovanni. Penn State's got Robbie Howard plus Gary Steen. Iowa's pretty good at 125. So, you know, I mean, some of the schools, you know, you wonder how much of an upgrade it is. And then here's the other thing, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. Money's a big issue because all these guys that had an extra year. That is another good segue into returning All-Americans. So Mark and I, once a week, will get bored and just talk about wrestling for an hour. And so we went through the brackets. We saw 6 guys out of 80 that we don't think are coming back. And we did this with our knowledge and then the help with the Flow Wrestling article that's out there or the running sheet of who's coming back. We have Louis Hayes not returning, Boo Llewellyn not returning, Jesse Delvecchia not returning, Bullard not returning, and Gremmel not returning. Those are confirmed. And we don't believe Logan Massa is coming back. Okay, I'm going to do some math. That's 74 out of 80. That's 92.5%. The very simple way to look at it is 90% would be basically 87.5 would be if 7 out of 8 All-Americans came back at every weight. So it's more than that. Like it's 7.375 All-Americans out of 8 are coming back. This is just literally sort of data to support what Mark just said and Grant said. It's going to be the craziest tournament ever. Then you stockpile on that the All-Americans that come back from the Ivy League, right? So like the Vitos, the Yannis, the Patrick Glories, the Darmsteads, whoever else I'm missing.
Well, Max Dean is going to wrestle for Penn State, returning runner-up. So, I mean, they're all over the place.
Well, but yeah. Okay, and that's from 2 years ago, right? So you recount those guys, and then you count incoming freshmen, and then you count guys that redshirted. I mean, it's going to be in like a Stevan Misic, right? If he were to wrestle this next year, right? Like, I mean, you're going to have over 80 All-Americans in the preseason rankings. Like, it's just going to be crazy. And then, like you said, Mark, some of these weight classes where guys are moving up, like 74, I'm going to miss some people, but Mackay's moving up, Hidley's moving up, Starachi's back. I mean, they're all back. That's the whole thing. Like, all those guys are back. Griffith is moving up. So if you say, I think Bullard's Bullard and Massa might be both at 74. So you say 6 of the 8 are back, and then just add those guys we just said, plus maybe Evan Wick. So one of those guys can be ranked 10th. Yeah. I mean, when you put 10 names on a sheet of paper, you have to write one of them down at 10. Like, I mean,
and the thing is, they're all good enough to be top 3 in normal years in the national tournament. That's the crazy part.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the quarters at the national tournament at 174? It's going to be unheard of.
The round of 16 is going to be crazy in a couple, like the 8-9, the 7-10, the 6-11 is going to be insane. 133 could look that way too. So yeah, it's and I think what that points out is the number of team points to win the national tournament will probably go down. Because if you have, so many All-Americans, like if Penn State can have 3 champions again, that's going to do it next year, I think. Because I just don't see how anybody, like, it's just going to be brutal, So, okay. One of the things we talked about last week, and we had, like, some of the podcasts got stacked up with Mike being on the road and everything with Hall of Fame, but we made a big point about Imar JB. And we apologize to folks that we wasted 50 minutes of your time for a wrestling match that didn't happen. But we didn't know it wasn't going to happen at the time we recorded it. We just want to mention that it didn't happen. It was super interesting to us that Imar mentioned that far out he wasn't going to be able to make weight. I had a couple people at Junior Duels like, well, JB just should have wrestled him. Well, first of all, JB's the A side. Like Floyd Mayweather says, like, I'm the A side of the card. So when you're JB, when you're the king, just because he lost at the Olympic trials doesn't mean he's still not one of the GOATs. Oh. If he says we agreed to make 79 and, if Grant and I agree to make 79, then we got to make 79. So it makes the world team trials at these non-Olympic weights even more interesting. Grant, I know you and I are really good friends with Alex Dieringer. Everything we're seeing is he looks like he's coming back strong. I had Alec Pantaleo on. He was great. GT, thank you for the phone number. And he talked about how good Ringer's looking. And so, when you talk about those 3 guys, and sometimes people poo-poo non-Olympic weights. I think these non-Olympic weight world trials could be amazing this year, especially if the United States has a good Olympics and places a couple guys or girls or women, at these weights, because these other people are going to move to the weights where they can make the team. Like 61, 70, 79 could just be insane. 92, I know we'll see Jaden and Nate and those, a bunch of those guys. It's going to be crazy.
And there's rumor Yanni's going up to 70 for the world trials.
See, that's interesting because America didn't even qualify the weight at 65. Mm-hmm. If he goes 70, does that point to him going 49 in the season? What do you guys think about that?
I think it does. And I think Yanni's already announced he's going 70 because he's beaten James Green, 3 times? Twice in the last year in events? And
he beat him twice. Grant, he beat him twice in that Club Cup, right?
I believe Yanni beat James at, was it that 150-pound man bracket? And then I believe he beat him maybe one other time. I can't think of the exact date that happened, but
that Club Cup thing in the fall.
Oh, like with the SRRTC versus Combat.
Yeah. I think they wrestled there. So, but Pantaleo, speaking of Lacuna Matata, circling everything around, like he's going to be a handful there too. But again, those are like part of what you want to see is just maybe matchups you haven't seen before, right? Like Pantaleo Yanni's intriguing, right?
Yep.
Like you got a super explosive guy versus a super clingy will beat you in scrambles. Not that the other one can't win scrambles and the other one can't be explosive, but kind of what here their bread and butter are. So to me, that's really interesting. Yeah. And, and that changes like 49. And then, like say Josh Saunders goes down to 41, he's jumping into a weight with a bunch of hammers and, we're also going to see some 5-time All-Americans next year, right?
Yeah. So I didn't want to hop in on the conversation that we had with the returning All-American stuff, but with whatever it was 70, was it 72 out of 8 or 74 out of 80?
74. Yep.
That 74 out of 80 does not include the Ivy League either. So yeah. Please know that there was a whole bunch of guys that were not even at the tournament that will be coming and taking out some of those ranking spots, seeding spots, and all of that. There's just so much to digest there, let alone some of these guys are returning, but there's probably another, I don't know how many that the Ivy League had, 20 All-Americans from their specific conference.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's a lot, right?
Like 125 alone, if Vito's there, you had Vito and Glory, right? And right now all 8 by our math are back. Well, Vito and Glory are not going to slot in at 9 and 10. Okay, they're not going to be ranked below, like, say, Killian Cardinale and those guys in the 7-8 match. So that bumps those guys to 9 and 10.
It'll be, yeah. So adding that to the wrinkle of our collegiate information, and then also potentially having some of those guys shift around specifically for their NCAA season to maybe benefit their freestyle, and having Yanni go up to 70 or whoever else there might be around, it becomes very, very interesting on the international circuit for, the world team trials, because that'll happen before season will pop off. So if Yanni goes up to 70, stays there, then he's probably looking at not cutting all the way down to 41 again.
Yeah. And the one thing, and it's interesting how these conversations go, because we know the topics, but we don't know where it's going to go. But one of the things USA Wrestling has done, which is smart, is if you place at a tournament, at a world tournament, you get an advantage for the next year. It's not just you get the number 1 seed, you're either sitting to the semis or the finals, whatever the case may be. So, it behooves you to try to do well as early as you can, because you get the benefit. Right now, 2022 is a big year for 2024, because if you can make the team in 2022 and medal, you're sitting in the catbird seat in 23, and then that puts you in the catbird seat at 24. We saw 24, the guys that made the finals, or the women that the women, I think, went 6 for 6. That were the ladies that were sitting in the finals. Now you could argue, well, yeah, because they were the best 6, that's why they were waiting. Or you could say, well, waiting certainly helped them. They were rested. And it's probably a function of both, right? It's probably not 100-0 or 0-100, but, so those things have a big effect on things. So, and I think that's one of the smartest things USA Wrestling has done in recent years. So I want to complain about something real quick. So dual meet scoring in freestyle and Greco is crazy. And I would like to make a suggestion. I don't know if this is a UWW thing or USA Wrestling thing, but here's how it works. If there's a decision and both wrestlers score, the winning team gets 3, the losing team gets 1. If it's a decision, but there's a shutout, it's 3-0. A tech fall where the person scores, so Grant beats me 12-2, is 4 Grant, 1 me. A tech fall shutout, 10-0, is 4-0, and then a pin is 5. It's really complicated. I think it'd be a lot easier if you just netted it out. So this would be my suggestion if anybody's listening. If Grant beats me 3-1, or say 6-1, it's 2-0 Iowa. We'll go Iowa and Missouri. Okay. So if Grant shuts me out, it's 3-0 Iowa. If Grant texts me, scoring or not, it's 4-0 Iowa. If Grant texts me and shuts me out, it's 5-0 Iowa. And if Grant pins me, it's 6-0 Iowa. I think it'd just be easier. It's cleaner. There's 5 levels now, because what I don't understand is Grant can beat me 2-0, and that's the same team point wise as him beating me 11-1. And I don't think that's the same level of dominance in a match. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but when you're doing commentary and you're trying to explain this to people, it's difficult. And also, we don't have very many sports where the losing guy scores points for his team. You can prevent points, which still happens. If Grant's beating me 9-0 and I can not give up the 10th point, that helps. You know, if I can score a point, that helps. But what do you guys think about that?
Is there any scenario you're beating Grant? We haven't talked about that. Okay. So
well, no. Yes. Between 45 and 50-year-old females, I'm their target demographic. so yes, but that's a very small slice of the pie. So
I don't know, David. I think it's a lot like collegiate style. If I beat you 7-0 collegiate style, my team gets 3 points. If I beat you 1-0, my team gets 3 points. 7-0 and 1-0, there's a big difference between that. That's dominating in itself. So I don't know. Grant, what do you think?
Well, I think as Dave has maybe posed the question for freestyle and or Greco dual meet format, I think I would like to see more international style duels so that we can get a little bit more accustomed to changing of point scoring. So every once in a while, you get to watch the Freestyle World Cup or the Greco World Cup. And even if you're an avid wrestling fan, you're still maybe not all the way up on all the international rules that maybe changed quite a bit, or even the team scoring. And you guys can both attest that being at the national tournament, there's still a lot of coaches that don't understand regular tournament scoring with regular folk style. So as we bridge that gap to like tournament points, and like international points are pretty easy when it comes to tournaments. You win it, you get 10. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very clean and crisp when it comes to international bracketing for point value based off medals and placing type thing. But if we want to do more for freestyle duels, I mean, outside of junior duels, cadet duels, schoolboy duels, these kids are only getting one freestyle dual meet tournament a year with this format. I mean, I think we have an opportunity to maybe grow that, especially as everyone that's pro dual meets in collegiate saying like, hey, we need more duels versus Saturday tournaments. So if we're trying to really say that that's the format and style that you want to be able to see, maybe changing the scoring would help us grow it a little bit better rather than being like, well, that's really weird. That guy scored 2 points, he gets a point for his team. It's never really been the case in any other scoring that's, I mean, I don't even know what to compare it to. Because even in boxing, it's like a 10-9 or 10-8 round. Like, you still lose.
Right.
There's like a clear cut, hey, doesn't matter if you score 1 point or 7 points and you still get beat. My team goes up 3, you get 0 points for your effort.
Yeah. So, Mark, to go to your point, you're right that 1-0 and 7-0 are the same. And so unless you literally had 25 different scoring systems, there's always going to be something there where there's this range and one wasn't as dominant as the other end of the range. But I think my point is more, so I talked to Kyle Klingman from Track Wrestling about this, and he's another Iowa guy, so you guys should like him. And, he said that actually makes a lot of sense. My point is this, the more I get on the media side of it, the more I realize we want to grow the sport. That's the one thing we all want to do. That's why we're doing this podcast. We love wrestling. We want more people to love wrestling as much as we do. Simplifying it makes sense. Like, I'm not saying like make a takedown worth 9 points. I'm not talking about fundamentally changing anything. Keep the exact same things and just make it something to 0 versus this stuff where you score a point. I just think it's easier to understand, also like when you're looking at the team race, the team points, like here's another thing I like about junior duels. There's 15 matches. So if it's a tie, who won 8? That's it. There's one criteria. Like I've started the last couple of years, you start keeping just tick marks on teams because this year wasn't close. Winners win Iowa, # winners win Iowa. But the other duels, when they've been super close, like Illinois, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Illinois, who won 8 that's a lot easier to keep track of than like most number of falls, most number of tech falls, most first takedown, total match points, like least amount of stalling calls, like all this crazy stuff, you know? Like this is so much easier, like 8 matches. And whether you think that's a good criteria or not, it probably is, right? If Grant's team won 8, my team won 7, they had more good guys. Like, you know, so, I mean, obviously my 7 guys had a little more dominance in a couple matches to even it up, but at the end of the day, 8 out of 15 won. Men, women, boys, girls. We try very hard not to say girls about senior level women, but when you're talking about 14-year-olds, I think calling them girls is appropriate. So anyway, just a thought, you know, USA Wrestling, UWW, I think it's kind of like putting the dot or the underline next to who's winning. Like it makes it a lot easier for people to follow along. So 2 last things. Black Wrestling Association Gala, 1-year anniversary was this weekend. We held it down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, tied it to Juneteenth, the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. And Nate Jackson, Kerry McCoy, Kenny Monday, Ryan Mango, bunch of the crew came in. I'm blessed to be a part of that. It was a cool thing. Jahi Jones is one of the advisory board members, and he was awesome. He did a ton to make this happen. And it reminded me a little bit of doing events with Randy Couture, where both of you guys have been there, where there were people that came and just got their picture taken with Kenny Monday. It might have bought a t-shirt and, you know, got their picture taken with Kerry McCoy. And it reminds me that wrestling people have heroes, and, you know, regardless of race, regardless of age, there's people we all look up to. And it was super cool to see how kind both sides of that interaction were. You know, like one of the reasons why I love Randy Couture, and, you know, GT, you've been out with us numerous times. No person is treated like they're small. He treats everybody like they're equal. Like he introduced himself to somebody who said, "I'm Randy." Like he doesn't stick his chest out. And these guys did the same thing. I sat in on the board meeting, and I think there's some cool things coming. So I just want to give those guys a shout. If you guys want to say anything about that, feel free.
I think it's great what they're doing. We have talked before, David. Wrestling is one of the few sports that I truly believe you don't see a lot of racism in. That's just me personally, because when I go out there and I'm coaching against a kid. I'm wrestling against another kid. It doesn't really matter what color, where they're from, what their religion is. You're just competing. And at the end of the day, the best guy's going to win. And that's the way it's always been. And we've always kind of had a brotherhood, because you root for guys they may not be on your team, but you root for them because they're wrestlers. You know what it takes to do this sport. It's a tremendous amount of work. I don't think anybody else would understand. I can't even think of another sport, maybe swimming, that is just that hard on your body nonstop. So, yeah, I think it's a great project, and I think wrestling's doing really good things with it.
GT?
Yeah, I think, I mean, once again, anything to help promote inclusion and promote, you know, heroes of that, you know, particular sport are great. So, I mean, they're focusing specifically on wrestling, which is great. We have a great history, especially with, you know, a living legend in Kenny Monday, you know, being, you know, one of the best African-American athletes on the international wrestling circuit ever, you know, going all the way back to basically the formalization of like FILA and, you know,
yeah.
Olympic and world champion and things, you know, things of that. So it's really cool to see and promote wrestling. And, you know, I'm excited to see where the organization takes their focus and being able to, again, promote the current athletes that are wrestling in the US and abroad to, yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be very cool. And once again, behind those athletes and coaches and mentors and heroes of the sport in any way that we possibly can.
Yeah. Kenny Monday, first African-American Olympic gold medalist from Tulsa, from like 10 minutes where the tournament was. So perfect ambassador for things. And I know some of the plans that are going on for next year. So I'm excited about that. So for people that don't know, one of the things that I pride myself on having been pretty good at back in the day was recruiting. Still talk to both of these guys and a bunch of other guys. So I have the scoop. I want to tell you this right now. Grant, get your NLI ready. In 2039, okay, Brady Matthew Collum, Matt Collum's son, will be ready to sign a scholarship. He was born on Saturday, the day before Father's Day. So Matt is actually an Iowa Central guy, but lived in St. Louis for a while. He and I are good buddies. Him and his girlfriend, Courtney Milner, had Matt was 7 pounds, 20 inches, and born on Saturday. So Matt watches, listens every week to Matt chat in, weighing in, and one of the good dudes in the sport, and was a really good wrestler and is a really good coach. So I'm sure that's somehow tampering or illegal recruiting to talk about him at age 3 days. But I'm gonna put it out there anyway. If somebody wants to sanction me, feel free. But Matt and Courtney, congratulations, and best wishes on raising a young man that I know is going to be a terror on the mat. So, you guys got anything else before we sign off?
No, congratulations to Matt. I coached Paul, his brother, who had a vicious front headlock, just nasty. I know Matt had the same front headlock because I've watched him wrestle, so I feel sorry for those 5-year-olds when this kid starts wrestling and puts that front head. Half of them are never going to come back to the sport, so I hope they don't teach him that until he gets a little bit older.
All right. Well, there's not a ton of events going on this weekend. I think we're going to dig into the NIL ruling next week, which we've talked about off air, is a fascinating subject. It's going to have a huge impact. It's name, image, likeness. If you're not sure what that is, Google it. And if you're really not sure what it is, just watch the video of AJ Ferrari walking around junior duels with no shirt on and talking about what he's going to do on July 1, because it is coming. And it is going to impact recruiting and revenue in sports. So until then, for Mark Ostrainer and Grant Turner, I'm David Mirikitani. Thank you to Nike. Thank you to USA Wrestling. And thank you to all of you for watching, listening, and sharing. Talk to you all next week.